With us now, journalist, author, and biographer Leslie Bloom. Her new book, Fallout, is about Hiroshima, and it's the Hiroshima cover-up and the reporter who revealed it to the world. Leslie, thank you so much for being here, and I'm fascinated by your book about a book which, of course, all of us read growing up, or a lot of us read growing up. John Hersey's extraordinary work in reporting on Hiroshima. Give us the backstory to that and to the New Yorker's decision to send him over there to get the facts on the ground while there was still time.
Well, after the bombs were dropped, it appeared that the government was being forthright about the might of its weapon and the true fallout on the ground in Hiroshima and Nagasaki. But John Hersey and his editors, they looked at the reporting that was coming out of Japan, and they realized that there was actually something missing, something really alarming, and that was true reporting on the human toll of the aftermath and any testimonies about what it had been like to be a human being on the receiving end of nuclear warfare. And so the odd thing also about it was that many powerful media operations had bureaus on the ground in Japan since day one of the occupation. So why weren't they getting the story? So the New Yorker decided if the big powerhouse media operations weren't good, either wouldn't or couldn't get the story, they were going to try. And so they dispatched John Hersey to attempt to try to get the story. Hersey started his reporting trip in China and then endeavored to get into occupied Japan from there to get the real facts.
It was an extraordinarily jarring report in the New Yorker. And as I said, the book also, so many of us grew up reading it. And what struck me when I read it, and you point this out, is how impassively Hersey told the story. He seemed to take extra care to not get in the way of the stories of those people he was interviewing.
Well, Hersey's idea was that, again, a lot of the reporting that had been done on the bomb was this very, pseudo-biblical language surrounding it, very eye of God. I mean, it was not really rendered in a way that readers and audiences around the world were reacting to. So he thought he would find a handful of blast survivors, just regular folks, a young widow with 3 school-aged children, a young female clerk, a young Japanese medic, and tell the story through their point of view, because he thought, look, not everybody can comprehend the physics of how the bomb works, or, visualize what it would be like to be part of a all-out global nuclear war. But everyone can empathize with, a handful of regular folks who meet with catastrophe one day. And yes, the impassiveness was key. And he said, that he later said that if he felt he had shouted his outrage from the rooftops, that it wouldn't have been as effective. But it was presented in an almost Hemingway-esque, nothing but the facts approach. This is what these 6 people, these 6 regular folks, experienced at 8:15 a.m. on August 6, 1945.
So, Leslie, obviously the United States government didn't want the public to see that human toll that John was pursuing. So what resistance did he meet from the government? Obviously, it was easier back then to cover something up, just as a practical question, and people with iPhones recording and posting to Twitter right away what was actually happening on the ground. So what was the push and pull between Hersey and the United States government?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that we could have the Hiroshima government today in the era of video cell phones. Hersey was an interesting case. There were a couple of reporters who had tried to get in before him, and they were more combative reporters. They had been butting heads with MacArthur's not occupation forces, but his wartime forces already for years, and they sneaked their way into Hiroshima and Nagasaki. And two of them really were able to get out reports in the very early days. But after that, the press was corralled into what one of them called a press ghetto. And they were closely monitored. Their dispatches were censored heavily. But what made Hersey an interesting candidate to get this story is that he wasn't a combative reporter. He had been a wartime ally of sorts, a good team player with the military during the war. He had written glowing profiles of military figures, including Douglas MacArthur. He had written a biography that he later would feel was overly laudatory and wished he could take out of print. But obviously, something like that is really going to help when you're trying to get into MacArthur's occupied Japan. And so they see him as being somewhat a more innocuous reporter. And if they give him access, he's not going to do anything to embarrass the country. And occupation officials would soon regret that decision.
And you in writing this book, you actually retrace Hersey's steps
Yes.
and actually found a central protagonist from his book. Tell us about that.
I did get to go to Hiroshima to research and to interview, and one of Hersey's last surviving central protagonists is still alive. She's a peace advocate. She was actually an infant on, she was an 8-month-old baby on August 6th, and she had been in the arms of her mother when their house collapsed on top of them upon detonation. They managed to get out of the debris of the house just before firestorms swept through their area and eviscerated their entire neighborhood. Her name is Koko Tanimoto Kondo. She has been a lifelong peace advocate. I met with her in Hiroshima, and we personally retraced Hersey's steps together, and she personally showed me where the hypocenter of the detonation had taken place.
All right, Leslie Bloom, thank you so much for being with us. The book is Fallout, the Hiroshima cover-up and the reporter who revealed it to the world. We greatly appreciate you being here. Thanks for checking out MSNBC on YouTube, and make sure you subscribe to stay up to date on the day's biggest stories. And you can click on any of the videos around us to watch more from Morning Joe and MSNBC. Thanks so much for watching.